Apex Legends Season 9 saw some of the biggest changes to a ton of weapons that we haven't seen in a season in honestly quite some time, and this does mean it is time for an updated Apex Legends weapon tier list. Not only have the changes affected the Battle Royale, but we also have a brand new mode, Arena, to now take into account for when we are ranking the weapons. However, as we do rank these weapons, I will note that I am primarily going to be talking about the Battle Royale, but there is much more crossover to the Arena mode than say when we did the Legend tier list last week. And if I do think a weapon performs better in Arena, I will make note of it when we are covering it. There's a ton of weapons to discuss, so let's just jump right into it. And if you have any questions or just want to chat, head over to Twitch, where we do stream nearly daily. Starting off with the D tier weapons, which I deem to be poor or underwhelming, and this holds the spot for a single weapon, and this is the P2020. The P2020 with hammer points I found to be pretty fun to use, to be honest, but without it, it's kind of pointless. I never want the P2020 anymore, and it doesn't really have any reason to be honestly picked up anymore. Especially since everyone is now spawning in with gray shields, this does make the P2020 even less viable because you do need to hit them with more bullets to down them, even though it did have a small damage buff. So yeah, it's really the only gun in the game right now I try to avoid at all costs, and I will drop this gun for anything else in the game. Moving on, let's now discuss the only weapon I have at C-, and this is going to be the 3030 Marksman weapon. For me, this weapon can have moments of brilliance, but honestly, it is pretty much on the edge of being almost bad, if not very underwhelming. There is some moments where it does work out, and the Shatter Caps addition to this weapon makes it have a little bit more utility in the close range, but overall, I really don't find too much of a reason to take this weapon, as other weapons like the G7 or the Bocek are honestly going to perform pretty similar to the 3030 and are way easier to use, and honestly, in my opinion, are way better than 3030. The 3030 for me just shoots too slow, and I mean too slow in the terms of the bullet velocity, as in you need to lead people, and it's kind of awkward to use it in this way. And I would say if you're going to use the 3030, you kind of might as well just use the Wingman. I feel like the Wingman is another heavy gun, and it's pretty much easier to use than the 3030. I wait for the day the 3030 gets a little buff to have a little bit more love, but for now, I'm really not taking the 3030. I would much rather take some of the other heavy weapons or light weapons that are very similar to it. Next up at a solid C rating, which I deem average, is going to be the first sniper rifle on our list, and this is going to be the Sentinel. Keep in mind, my list is really catered for overall killing power and potential. Snipers definitely have some viability and are fun to use, but in terms of meta, snipers just aren't really it, unless you're talking about the Kraber, of course. Just one thing to be aware of though, as I do rank the snipers on my list, if you like playing Apex to snipe, then they're going to be ranking way differently than what I'm going to be ranking them, so just keep that in mind as I do rank the snipers. The Sentinel, in my opinion, is a very fun gun to use, but I find the weapons like the longbow or the charge rifle to be way more consistent in terms of dealing damage, and the Sentinel honestly will need to eat into your shield resources, which I really don't like either. I don't want to have to use my shields on the Sentinel to make the Sentinel feel like I need to use it, because if I'm not using the charge up on the Sentinel, I really don't see any reason to take it, as you might as well just take like the longbow. I will say the bolt action sniper is a blast to use, and it's a good time, and if you are playing someone like Rampart, I do think the Rampart with the amped walls and the charge up can be a really good way to use a Sentinel. But again, I really do like all the other snipers better, and I think the Sentinel is something I do walk over more times than I pick it up. But again, this sniper can be a good time from time to time if you do just want to change up how you are playing, and I would definitely give it a try if you do want to have that crispy, clean bolt action sniper rifle action. Moving on to our next weapon for C is going to be the L-Star. And the L-Star is the first weapon that I will say is a great option in the early rounds of arenas. Now I'd even say it's B to A tier worthy in that mode, but for the Battle Royale, it really doesn't have too much range. It has a lot of spray on screen, meaning you can't really see where you're aiming if you are shooting at range. And for me, it just has too much recoil, and there's a lot of better options out there if you do want kind of an LMG or an SMG type of action. And also for me, I will say I really need to use this weapon as a kind of hip fire, almost like an SMG rather than an LMG. If I do want to use an energy weapon like this, I might as well take the Volt, because the Volt is way more reliable in all aspects of the game. However, the L-Star does have a little bit more different type of playstyle, as you don't really need to reload it, and you can go a long time without reloading this weapon. And it does make for a good time, and it definitely switches up the way you play from time to time. The L-Star is a solid C, an average weapon, and I would say in Arena it's even better, as I would rank it in the B area for the first rounds in Arena. Moving on now, we have my only weapon at C+, and this is going to be the longbow sniper rifle. The longbow used to be my favorite gun in Apex. Back before the meta of the current days was really figured out, when you could actually use sniper rifles, you didn't really have to worry about a sweaty team pushing you. The longbow used to be one of my go-to pickups every game. And now it's a little bit awkward. It's kind of in between the G7 and the Sentinel, maybe almost like the 3030 a little bit. Since the Skull Piercer was removed from the game, I will say it's a little bit more solid to do damage to the head, which is pretty nice that you can pick it up and you don't need as many attachments. I will say I'm surprised no one is really talking about how headshot damage across the board against all weapons in the game, and I would say specifically snipers, was semi-ghost nerfed. With the fact that now everyone has a gray helmet on, which means everyone by default is getting a 20% headshot damage reduction, which means if you find one of these weapons early on in the game, you're no longer doing 20% more headshot damage. It's a little weird, and I just find it a little bit odd that no one is really talking about how everyone has a helmet now, which reduces the headshot damage. The longbow can absolutely rip though if you are hitting consistent body shots and with a headshot in there from time to time. And it's a great weapon if you can open up with a headshot and then you can quickly tap them into the body. And you can't really do this with the Sentinel. It's a solid sniper if you're looking to snipe, but in terms of meta guns, the longbow just isn't anymore, and it's been a while since it's been the meta. It's a blast to use from time to time, but under my recommendation, I would say not to pick it up. It's a fine sniper rifle, but there's a lot better options out there. Next up at B-, we have two of my kind of more recent preferred secondary guns, and this is actually true in arena mode. These are the RE45 and the Mozambique. The RE45 is a great secondary swap to. It has superb handling, which means you can swap to this gun really fast. It's not quite like the R99 though, where it has a huge magazine size and is fairly easy to control. I will say the RE45 takes a little bit more skill to use in my opinion, but it is really fun to use. And again, in arena, the RE45 is only 250 materials, which is a great purchase in my eyes in the earlier rounds. And the Mozambique, again, is similar to the RE45. However, in arena, the Mozambique is the best secondary gun in the game, in my opinion. It's free, which is absolutely incredible. And you can get a blue bolt on the Mozambique for only 175 points, which is cheaper than a base EVA 8, which is absolutely wild. Although it lost hammer points, I think overall, the Mozambique is a more solid option. The 6 rounds in the magazine makes it a little bit more stable. And overall, I can't believe I'm saying this, but the Mozambique is a fine weapon now. It's turned into actually a good gun from this kind of crappy troll weapon that we used to have. Keep in mind, the Mozambique did have a little buff where the pellet spread was also reduced, which just makes it way more consistent, and you can hit people a 30 or 45, which is a full hit at a little bit more further ranges than you could before. I do love the Mozambique as a secondary, and I would absolutely recommend you try it out, especially in arena mode. Next up, we have two weapons at B, which I deem to be good in a solid B. These are the Hemlock and the Charge Rifle. The Hemlock has seen a ton of nerfs since its heyday back a couple seasons ago where it was absolutely wild, but I think the Hemlock right now might be a little bit kind of a flying under the radar. I think it's still a solid option and a good gun, but there are other specific weapons like the Flatline, which I think are a little bit better than the Hemlock right now. My least favorite part about the Hemlock is its iron sights, which I think do really limit its range if you don't have an optic, but I do think the Hemlock is still a solid gun, and it has a little bit of it all. It is solid close range because you can hip fire it. It has solid medium range, of course, in that burst mode, and it even has single shot viability at the long ranges. Overall, I think the Hemlock is a solid assault rifle, and it is definitely worthy of the B tier spot. Moving on from this though, we have my favorite sniper rifle that isn't the old Kraber, and this is the Charge Rifle. The Charge Rifle works pretty much across the board. It works in high tier competitive environments, it works in ranked, it works in pubs, and it even works in arena if you're willing to spend the money on it. It's great to farm damage, it's great to have map presence, it's super easy to use for pretty much all players, because even if you aren't hitting that big Charge Rifle shot at the end of it, you're still doing partial damage, which is pretty good, and it does make a really annoying gun to go up against. The only drawback for me is that it is pretty poor at close range, but again, it is a sniper rifle, so I do understand this. I think it's the most consistent damage dealer out of all the snipers. If you're not using it, I would definitely give it a try. It's a solid B tier, and in my opinion, the Charge Rifle is something that everyone should be aware of how to use, and I think it's a good option for you to try out. Let us now discuss two weapons that I have at B+, and these are two weapons that are honestly pretty much brothers, and this is both the Havoc and the Devotion. These guns fully kitted though honestly are A to A+ weapons in my eyes, but these weapons have huge problems, and this is the turbocharger. Wow, does the turbocharger just feel absolutely impossible to find sometimes. And without the turbocharger, I honestly deem these weapons more like a B-. And because of this, again, I'm ranking them in the middle of their two kind of fully kitted and no kitted, and this is B+. I think the Havoc is absolutely insane at the close range hipfire, and you definitely need to use the Havoc more like an SMG, but if you do have the turbo, it's absolutely wild how fast you can kill someone. And honestly, another thing that really isn't talked about too much with the Havoc is that a purple or gold magazine Havoc has 36 rounds, which just means the Havoc has a lot of room for error, and you can still down 2 people if you are missing some shots with 1 magazine. The Havoc is definitely a good gun, and you really need to be picking it up if you're not. And the Devotion is kind of similar to the Havoc, but I do think the Devotion overall is the better one. I personally don't really like the Devotion because honestly I kind of suck with it. Part of me wishes the Devotion wasn't energy ammo because I honestly do have a hard time finding energy ammo these days, especially because a lot of people are using the Volt, which just does eat a lot of ammo, and again, I can't really find the energy ammo, and the Devotion more so than any of the other energy guns in my eyes just absolutely rips through ammo. It's pretty wild how fast you can use all the ammo. I kind of wish the Devotion would go back into the care package, but till then, if you don't mind attachment hunting, or if you land on a Devotion with the turbo off spawn, I would definitely pick it up. It's pretty much an instant pickup in my eyes, because you do have this A+ tier weapon that is absolutely insane. And our final weapon in the B category at B+ is going to be the previous S+ tier shotgun, and this is the Massive shotgun. The Massive has seen a slew of nerfs, the pellet spread was increased, the damage was reduced. The Massive just isn't as reliable as it once was, but it's still a fine secondary if you can't find the Peacekeeper or the EVA 8, which are better in my eyes. I kind of don't understand the Massive's role in the game right now, as it feels like it should have been swapped out for the Peacekeeper or just done something else to it. I'm not really quite sure. It feels really weird having so many different shotgun choices on the ground. I can't quite put my foot to it. The Mastiff isn't bad and it isn't amazing. I think it's just a good gun that is a good filler weapon until you come across a better shotgun. But secondary wise, again, the Mastiff is still a pretty good gun to have in your arsenal, and I would definitely give it a try. One thing again worth noting though is that the Mastiff did get a fire rate buff to compensate a little bit for that damage reduction. And I do think this was a fair trade. It makes it a little bit easier to use, I will say. But overall, the Massive just isn't at all what it used to be last season or the season before. I just want to take a second and say if you are enjoying this video or if you just want to support me, hit that like button. It does help the video get noticed a ton, and I appreciate your support. Let's just roll right into the A tier weapons, and these are weapons that I deem to be very good or amazing. And the first one at A- is going to be the G7. And I honestly can't even believe I'm putting it here because I have absolutely crapped on this gun for the past few seasons, just saying the G7 is trash. And honestly, I kind of slept on this gun until my friend Teddy got back into the game, and he's been telling me that the G7's been crazy, and I've been telling him absolutely not, it's terrible. But wow, was I wrong. I think the G7 is an absolutely fine or even great weapon. But the G7 is A- for a few reasons. First up, in Arena, it's an absolutely phenomenal pickup. It's so cheap to upgrade. It's a cheap option to get in the first few rounds, and it's honestly something that I will use all the way through round 9. It's very effective at what it does, and this is mid-range picking, which is absolutely crucial in Arena. And I will say you can absolutely mow squads over that are stacked up in a line, and you're probably going to see this in a few clips here. But it's a great option for slower ranked games as well, and it even has decent hipfire. It also saw a small shadow buff of increased strafe speed, which I find is pretty good, and it does help it be a little bit more maneuverable. It's a light ammo gun, which is also a bonus. The ammo is easy to get, unlike something like energy or even sometimes heavy ammo, and it's way easier to use than the 30-30. I previously wasn't a fan of this gun again, but since Arena came out, it definitely can shred teams, and I've been sleeping on it for a while. I would definitely say pick up the G7 if you haven't recently. It's absolutely an insane weapon that does take a little bit skill to use, and I think it will work out for you. The second A- gun is a weapon that has gone from pretty good to poor, and now we're back to pretty great, and this is going to be the Alternator. The Alternator has been in and out of relevance a number of times, but right now, the Alternator on this list is my sleeper pick of the entire list. It virtually has no or extremely easy to control recoil, and it has a great magazine size. You can throw it 2 times on this, which does kind of make it almost like a mid-range weapon as well. It's a very solid pickup for the early game too, and I honestly enjoy finding it in the early game. The Alternator also has really great hipfire and is really easy to control. It might not have the fastest time to kill, but if you are struggling with your R99 shots, I honestly probably would recommend you to pick up the Alternator instead, because it's way more forgiving, it's way easier to use. If there's one weapon out of all the SMGs that is a jack of all trades, it's absolutely the Alternator. Next up at a solid A tier, we have a trio of weapons, and this is going to be the Flatline, the Wingman, and the Bowcheck Compound Bow. The Flatline for me has been one of my personal favorite weapons for pretty much the last 4 or 5 seasons. It might be one of, if not the most consistent weapon in terms of it really has never gone through many buffs or nerfs, and it also has a fairly high skill ceiling, which makes it fun to use and very satisfying once you get it down. The Flatline in a lot of ways can act as a close range weapon due to its absolutely insane hipfire capabilities. If you're not hipfiring the Flatline at close ranges, then you're not really doing it right in my opinion. It has some medium range viability and then even long range tap firing with the Anvil receiver right now. There's not much that the Flatline can't do, and it's one of my go-to pickups every game, and it's that weapon that everyone needs to learn how to use. If the Spitfire ever gets another nerf, I think this thing will be your go-to mid-range heavy weapon. Next up is going to be the Wingman. This is a much harder weapon for me to rank because in the hands of an accurate or a good shooter, it's absolutely S tier. But for the most part, I think it's an excellent weapon for the average player. The Wingman has had some of, if not the most history in terms of buffs and nerfs, and at the moment, it feels pretty perfect. It's great to use, but not necessarily overpowered. In my opinion, all players need to learn how to use the Wingman for a number of reasons. First off, it will benefit your aim and accuracy with all the other weapons in the game. If you can shoot the Wingman, you're going to be able to shoot all the other guns, and it actually might be one of the best spawn weapons to get because it's pretty great even with no attachments because it does have a lot of natural power to it. I love the Wingman. It's something that I personally don't take too often because I'm not too good with single shot guns, but you definitely need to be picking it up and practicing with it. I think you'll find it very rewarding. And our final normal A tier weapon is going to be the Bocek compound bow. When Season 9 launched, the Bocek was absolutely nuts. I can't think of any other weapon really that was as similar to how the Bocek was in terms of it being so powerful, other than maybe the Season 3 charge rifle, I believe it was. The Bocek still has some 2-tap potential on certain shielded enemies, but before it was absolutely wild. And I will say, the Bocek brings this type of stealth element into the game that we haven't really seen before, and I do think it's okay right now. It can get a little excessive when you have a whole team of people using bows and you have no idea where you're getting shot from. The body damage is now 60 instead of 70, which does mean you can still 3-tap blue armored enemies, which is pretty good. And overall, I do think the Bocek is a well-added addition to the game. Unlike when the 3030 came out, I was pretty lukewarm on the 3030. The Bocek, on the other hand, feels great to use. The bow is still really good, and in a lot of ways it's like the Wingman. It requires a highly skilled player and shooter to use it effectively and efficiently. Otherwise, I do think the bow and the Wingman will be almost like a little bit detriment to yourself if you are missing and wasting a lot of shots. But overall, I think the Bocek is a blast to use. It's a solid weapon, and I do think it's in a fair spot right now. Our final weapon in the A tier of guns is going to be the Peacekeeper at A+. The Peacekeeper is an insanely good shotgun that requires a lot of skill to use, but it was nerfed from what it was previously before it was in the care package. My only issue with the Peacekeeper is that you really need to be doing some headshots for it to be worth taking over an EVA 8 in my opinion. But that being said, it's an insanely strong shotgun that works well as a secondary and has much more range than the majority of the other shotguns because of that choke. This does allow for some easier shots at range, and it does create for a unique and fun playstyle if you are able to get shots on enemies with it. The PK is one of my go-to secondaries, and it's a gun that I really miss being on the ground, and I'm so happy that I get to use it a little bit more now. However, I do think there is another gun that we're soon going to talk about that's a little better. So let's now start talking about the best weapons in the game, and for starters, we have the R99, the Volt, and the EVA 8 at S tier. First, the two SMGs for me. The R99 and the Volt are just absolutely insane killing machines that work well in all forms of play, arena, ranked, pubs, competitive. The Volt is an absolute beast with honestly some insane range and a great time to kill that gives it some viability even at mid-range. The R99, on the other hand, is still the king when it comes to the close range, fast killing, and fighting machine. The R99 does require a fair amount more skill to use than the Volt, but if you can control the R99, it will do you really well. And the better you can bridge the gap to the medium to the close range with that R99 will mean you are going to up a lot of the other players in the game. Both SMGs for me are instant pickups, and if I get them early on in games, I'm going to be using them all game long because there are very few guns that are better than these. On the other hand though, the EVA 8 is my go-to secondary weapon that can honestly just dish out an incredible amount of damage that is not only reliable, it's easy to do due to its pellet pattern. It's even better with a bolt on it, and for me, it's extremely consistent, which is something that I want. I want to know that when I pull out my secondary gun after doing like 120, maybe 150 damage to someone, I want to know that I can down them pretty much instantly, and the EVA 8 absolutely does this, and it's extremely forgiving. All the shotguns right now are pretty great, but the EVA 8 for me wins out of them all due to its ease of use. If you are sleeping on the EVA 8 because it has been pretty poor in the past, look no farther because it's definitely in the meta right now, and it definitely shows because all the pros are picking it up in the competitive scene. And finally, of course, we are missing two weapons, and it's no surprise, the R301 and surprise to surprise, the Spitfire are my two S+ tier weapons because they are, in my opinion, the best two guns in the game right now. The R301 has been this consistent gun for a while now. It's absolutely insane how well you can use the R301 at hipfire close range, medium range, and even long range spraying or long range anvil receiver. It's absolutely a great weapon. Light ammo is easy to find. It doesn't really require a lot of attachments. The R301 is my go-to weapon if I'm not picking up the Spitfire. It is just so easy to use. It's honestly like the bread and butter gun in Apex Legends. If there's a new player to the game, I'm going to recommend them pick up the R31 because it's really good and it's really easy to use. And finally, of course, you probably expected it, the Spitfire right now, as of this video, is the S+ tier weapon that honestly everyone has been using. It's kind of a little bit toxic, I'll say. We got a little nerf after the launch of Season 9, but I really don't see any difference in it. And this Spitfire has 50 rounds. It does something like 18 to the body, which means you can wipe out like 2 or 3 squads with one magazine if you're hitting all your shots. It is absolutely an incredible weapon. I really don't need to say too much on the Spitfire right now. If you're not using it, it's probably because you're choosing not to use it because it's kind of toxic. But I absolutely do love the Spitfire, and if you want an easy-to-use weapon that's going to dish out an insane amount of damage, definitely pick up the Spitfire because it's the best gun in the game right now. And just lastly, one thing I'm going to say that we didn't really touch on is the care package weapons, the Triple Take, the Kraber, and the Prowler. I deem all of these guns to be S tier. I will say the Triple Take might kind of be more like A to A+ tier. The Triple Take in my eyes doesn't really belong to be in the care package, but it is there right now. And I do think it's a very good gun. It's just something that I don't pick up too much. The Kraber obviously is the Kraber. It's always been insane. It's one of the only guns in the game that can one-shot an enemy from a red Evo down to the ground, and the Prowler is an insane SMG. I don't really take the Prowler as much if it's earlier on in the game, but if it's later in the game, I almost always pick up the Prowler. So what do you guys think of my tier list? Let me know in the comments down below. I think a lot of the guns right now in the Apex Legends are pretty much usable. It's kind of similar to the Legends. A lot of the Legends are usable. A lot of the guns are usable. I feel like overall, Respawn has done a very good job balancing everything in the game. I can't wait to see what is coming out in the near future. I am kind of expecting another nerf to the Spitfire, but time will tell. If you guys want to chat with me or check out the community, we do have a Discord. Join that up, and I would love to chat with you about Apex Legends. And again, I will see you live in the Twitch streams. Peace out.